Happy Saturday and welcome to the Marketing MadMen. Nick Constantino here, and we got a big show today. And the reason I say big is not necessarily because of how awesome I am. It's because of the big property in which we're talking about. So today we are talking about Centennial Yards, which is one of the largest, and at some point in this show we'll get the real dollar amount, one of the largest real estate developments, commercial real estate developments that's happening in this country. It's in the middle of downtown Atlanta, and the president and CEO of that company is Brian McGowan, and he is here with me today. Brian, how you doing, bud?
I'm good, Nick. How are you?
So we will get the real number because you say $5 billion. I know what that means. So before we get to Centennial Yards, and I can't state how big of a deal this is. As somebody who's been involved in the sports world with World Cup coming and Super Bowl, I can't state how important this is. It feels like it's been the missing gap in one of the greatest cities in, like, we're having our Detroit in the car boom moment. Mm-hmm. This city is the epicenter of everything. I've been lucky enough to be around it, but it will not do justice to talk about this until we talk about your history and what got you into the point where you're the guy they picked to take on this monumental task, because
no pressure.
Like we're going to talk about behind the scenes. Oh my goodness. So let's start. You were appointed by Barack Obama to be U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce.
Yes.
Talk about that. Talk about what got you there, what it was like to get that call, and what the day-to-day actually entailed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even step back to the job before that, which was I worked for Arnold Schwarzenegger for 3 years. So I was Deputy Secretary of Commerce for the state of California.
Which most people should know, probably don't, that California by itself is like the 7th or 8th biggest economy in the world. Fifth biggest economy in the world. Just California by itself.
Yeah, it's definitely a country in and of itself. But so prior to that, I was working for cities and counties in Southern California. So I went to college in I grew up in New York, New Jersey, went to college in Southern California. First job out of college, I worked for the city of Palm Springs, California. Okay. Sonny Bono, for the young people on the phone, listening to the show, don't know who Sonny Bono is, but he was a actor, comedian, singer. He was our former mayor and our congressman when I worked for the city of Palm Springs, and then I worked for a couple of other cities and counties, and then I got a call to go into the Schwarzenegger administration. So. Which, of course, you say yes. You can't say no
for so many reasons.
To Arnold.
So many reasons.
Yeah, the governor. So I went there, did that for 3 years. Amazing job. Got to travel around the world with him and sell California, which is an amazing state. And my job was economic development, economic growth. And then Barack Obama got elected. And I was really impressed with him and what he was doing and saying. And I knew at some point I'd want to work in the federal government, and I felt like that was the moment. So I started calling everybody I knew. Remember, I was working for a Republican governor, and Barack is a Democrat. So I was calling everybody I knew to figure out, did I know somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody? I'm on LinkedIn. I'm trying to figure out the relationships. I'm firing my resume out because these jobs are hard to get as a presidential appointee. And you typically have to have volunteered on the campaign or donated a lot of money. And so I fired out a bunch of resumes, kind of gave up, and then suddenly I got a call. It was a message. It was, I'm so-and-so from the White House Liaison Office, and we'd like you to fly to Washington, D.C. next week to meet with the Secretary of Commerce. Cool. So I listened to it, and I play it for my wife. I go, that's not like any of my friends screwing with me. Is this it sounds legit, right? Yeah. So she's like, yeah, I think that's legit. Yeah. So I called, and I flew to Washington, D.C., and long story short, I got the job. And there were like two parts of the job. So I was running the U.S. Economic Development Administration, which is, won't get into all that, but it's economic growth and competitiveness across the United States. And then the BP oil spill happened. And so the Secretary of Commerce asked me if I'd be interested in, literally called me into his office. There was a National Incident Command set up to respond to the BP oil spill. Secretary of Commerce says, they're looking for someone to run the economic solutions team within the National Incident Command.
Did you throw air quotes on that? Economic solutions team? You're the fall guy. Hey,
I was like, what is this? I literally asked him, I said, so what, but I'm interested, but tell me about the job. And he goes like, I don't know what the job is, but I need to know like right now. Do you want to do it or not?
That's about right.
I was like, yeah, sure. And then a week later, I'm sitting in the Situation Room with all these people you see on TV, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to help communities along the Gulf kind of mitigate the impacts of the oil spill. So it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, so I have so many questions, but I'm going to start with one from each of these things because I think it's, again, set up why you're in the job you are now. So for the first one, I've been to Palm Springs. It is an odd place. It's 123 degrees. It really will get that hot.
And hotter.
Coachella didn't exist back in that time, so people didn't have the attention to Joshua Tree and some of those things in the area. I remember there was one kind of crappy casino, like as you're coming in off the highway. But that being said, it was a huge tourism. There was a lot of tourism in Palm Springs, right?
Yeah.
So how much was tourism a part of what you were doing in Palm Springs? And then for Schwarzenegger, were you involved? Because you're talking about economic development. Tourism is a huge part of that.
Well, in Palm Springs, I wasn't involved in tourism at all. My job was to get the city less dependent on tourism by attracting industries and other types of companies there. Now, when I was in the Schwarzenegger administration, I oversaw a large portfolio which included the tourism campaign called Visit California. So that was part of the portfolio that I was overseeing, so which is a huge program, Marketing California. So, tourism creates jobs, economic growth and impact, and we know this in Atlanta. That's why we're such a sports city, and we attract all these big events. So, yes, it's a really strong economic development tool.
Okay, so next question. This is going to be a harder one. The next question is, how happy are you when you got the call from the federal government to be involved that Facebook didn't exist when you were a child and none of the things that you did and mistakes you made were on record? Because that's
so happy. I have to tell a funny little story.
I always ask, and I've asked every politician, like, oh, thank God there was no social media when I was young. And I'm like, I hear you.
I have 5 sons, 3 off the payroll, so they're in their 20s.
Congrats.
For the moment.
Right.
And I tell them all the time, you got to be very careful what you're posting. I tell young people all the time, be careful what you're posting. So I was happy, but there was this one incident came up, so I had top secret clearance to get into the administration. Okay. So there was no problem there. FBI literally shows up at your house. Yeah. They interview your neighbors. They ask your friends for 3 people that know you as well. So they try to go really deep to find things. And thank God there was nothing to find. Let's be clear, was the camera. Nothing to find. And so I ended up in the administration. But when I worked on the BP oil spill work, because there was a meeting in the Situation Room every Friday, I had to have a higher level of clearance. So I wasn't concerned. I filled out the forms, and 2 weeks later, I get a call saying, I think it was the National Security Agency, some agents from the National Security Agency want to come and talk to you. You get kind of a cold sweat. You're like, huh? Yeah. Like, okay.
Is it about something specific?
Yeah. So this is funny. So I'm nervous. I'm like, what? Did I miss something? Or 2 agents come in, literally in black suits, no smiles, just like out of a movie.
Stoic,
and they said, so we looked into your background. We found an issue. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you found it. I didn't know about it.
This is going to be fascinating. This is what it was. She goes, so we found an unpaid ticket for when you were a junior in high school.
Whoa.
I was like, I had a ticket when I was a junior in high school. Like, I didn't even remember.
They still keep records of that?
It was crazy. So anyway, she's
did they
like,
make you pay it?
Yeah. She goes,
with interest or without interest?
You have to clear that up. Thank God, no interest. Yeah. But they had to go back in. I'm older than you. They had to go to the warehouse and look through boxes and shift through files. It wasn't like they could Google it or search it on a search engine. Yeah. It was, they had to actually go find the original ticket, and I ended up having to pay it before I could actually be approved.
$12?
It was something.
What are we talking about?
No, I mean, when they told me, I started laughing. I'm like, oh my God, a speeding ticket? That's what this is about. I was like, that's easy. We can fix that.
So that was such a better story. So the last question is more about BP. So this was a huge point in this country where a lot of the tide started turning on oil, and there was so much involved here. Yeah. What were the takeaways that you got from that about how to interact with the public and how to, because I think one of the problems now is the easy answer is just kind of deny and just blow it off like it didn't happen. What did you learn from having to tackle that head on and deal with all the people whose lives were affected? What did you learn from that damage control?
I think the big takeaway for me was when I was formulating the plan of what we were going to do to mitigate the economic impacts. You're sitting in roomfuls of Harvard economists and MBAs, smart people, and they're all talking about analysis. Well, we need some data. And I'm like, well, I'd like to deploy 21 teams across the Gulf from Bay County, Florida to Galveston, Texas, and get on the ground and listen to people and talk
Yeah.
to people. And there was one economist, his name is Jared Bernstein. He's still, I think he's in the White House now. And he said, well, can't we just deploy 1 or 2 teams and then extrapolate?
Because Galveston, Texas is the same.
Right? I was like, I literally said this. I go, you understand the accents from one county to the next in one state, Louisiana, are different. The industries are different. They're completely different things. Besides the fact that a lot of this is they just want to know people care. Like us getting on the ground and sitting in the room, people looking them in the eyes and asking how is this affecting you was meaningful, like very, very meaningful. And so that was the big takeaway, was that these are all great people. They're hardworking. It was oil industry, fisheries, tourism, and they just wanted to feel like Washington, D.C. cared about their plight and what they were dealing with. And fortunately, because at that moment I was reporting directly to the president, I had the authority to kind of reach into any federal agency and pull resources to apply to a particular situation. So it was good.
I think it's an age-old story. It's in marketing. It's in business. Data only tells half the story. And when you become over-reliant on data, you cannot,
that's what exactly right.
That people are desperate for an emotional connection.
Yeah.
And the emotional connection is not a guy saying, hey, yay or nay, or on a scale of 1 to 10, it is a personal connection. And I think, if I'm speaking for you, I have to imagine that reinforcing how important the relationship is and how emotional connection, no one's going to come to your place because you're looking at them as a number. They're going to come to your place because it made them feel happy, and you can't quantify that with some data set.
Yeah. And also, shaking someone's hand and looking them in the eyes. That's work from home. I'm old school.
Me too.
Our organization, everybody's back in the office full time. I think you really lose something by just being on a Teams or Zoom call without actually looking in someone's eyes and reading their body language and shaking their hand, and the serendipitous interactions you have between those meetings.
I agree completely.
You miss out on all.
And I think for us, the big thing was it is hard to hold someone accountable over a Zoom. It's hard to hold someone accountable who's not wearing pants.
Agree.
Because they haven't decided that day to put them on. Right? They're just going to take a button down because it's like.
Point.
So, all right. So now that we talked about not wearing pants, we'll go back to our first commercial break. You've been listening to the Marketing MadMen on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back. All right.